Okay, okay. The question is, do I always look like a vampire? So here's the deal. Last week on the Duds, Rachel and Jessica decided to do a video blog. So this week, I decided to make my own. I'm going to assume most people, before doing a video blog, try to make themselves look better than they normally do. I'm obviously not that person. This is actually my very first time ever vlogging. Not to be confused with vlogging, which would be a pretty honest mistake if you were, an 18th century pirate. Do I look at the camera or do I look here? Which one is more uncomfortable for you watching? What if I just did this whole vlog like this? Oh my god, I'm never getting married. I thought for this vlog that I would discuss at length one of my favorite movies of all time. One that I think a lot of people would mutually agree with. That, of course, being the 1998 adaptation of The Parent Trap, starring Lindsay Lohan and Lindsay Lohan's CGI twin. I've been watching this movie pretty much on the reg since I was about 8 or 9 years old. And it dawns on you as you get older, you realize that this movie is completely ridiculous. So I'm going to spend an incredibly unnecessary amount of time talking about all the things about The Parent Trap that I find absolutely illogical, which is almost everything. I consider myself a pretty reliable expert when it comes to anything involving The Parent Trap. I just so happen to have a whole lot in common with Hallie Parker and Annie James. I have a twin sister, which is pretty crucial, I would say. My parents also met abroad. My parents are both of different nationalities. My parents also divorced when I was really young and have lived for the majority of my life in separate countries. I went to an all-girls summer camp, and I have a secret handshake with my butler. Doesn't everybody? Well, now that I've overwhelmed you with my enormous credibility, if only I could put any of that on my resume. By the way, I'm about to go like pigeon on this movie. I'm going to pick this movie to death. I don't know why I used pigeon as an analogy. Let's get started. Here's the first thing that I don't get about The Parent Trap. How is it that a boy gets accidentally sent to an all-girls summer camp, but for some reason everybody is weirdly okay with that? Remember that kid who is on that giant cell phone talking to his mom, freaking out, be like, Mom, you gotta come get me. I'm at an all-girls camp, blah, blah, blah. What is the mom doing? Well, she's on the phone with her son who's telling her, you sent me to an all-girls camp. Okay, honey, have fun. But he's there the whole time, so I guess she didn't do anything about it. The real question is, why no one informed the directors? Or do they know? Surely when he went to his cabin, I guess, like, didn't his counselor or any other girl at this camp see him and be like, you're not a female? Did he stay in the cabin for the term with all these other girls and stuff? I know that sounds really Victorian and, he saw her ankles or something, but that's weird. The best part is at the end of the movie, or end of the camp sequence, he's giving out his address and stuff to all his new friends and like, keep in touch. So I guess he's coming back next year, which is going to be great when he's like 14. He'll be the happiest kid in the world. As a former camper and counselor of an all-girls summer camp, that would never happen. Not to mention that if you've ever done any research on Camp Walden in Maine, which is real, it's like 90 years old. Famous for being a girls' camp. Oh, but now it gets even weirder at this camp. How is it that two strangers show up at the same camp and happen to be genetically identical, look like they were cloned from each other? And yet again, everyone at this camp is bizarrely accepting of this. What kind of summer camp is this? Why is no one more alarmed about these identical people who apparently don't know each other. I just feel like there's not enough people freaking out about this scenario. I was a counselor of a cabin of 12-year-old girls. They freak out about body wash. Two girls showed up at Waldemar, where I went to camp, that were identical but didn't know each other, and they were 12 amongst all the other 12-year-old girls. It would be pandemonium. And no one thinks it's a little weird that they didn't even notice each other until the fencing match, when they take off their masks and see each other. They don't have mutual 12-year-old friends who are like, hey, Hallie or Annie, there's this other girl that looks just like you. If I took off a fencing mask and saw myself, I feel like I would be more freaked out than that. I wouldn't be like, I have class and you don't. No, I'd be like, oh my God, that's my twin. I guess that's what happens when you go to a camp ran by Janice from Friends. Can we talk about how these girls, for some reason, have unknown access to the most random stuff I have ever seen in my entire life? Vats of chocolate, bags of feathers, needles, gallons of honey, syrup, matches. Where is all this stuff coming from? How do you get an entire cabin of furniture on the roof? It's not possible. Moving on. I find it incredibly hard to believe that a preteen, normal, well-adjusted girl in 1998 has absolutely no idea, never heard of Leonardo DiCaprio. You know what scene I'm talking about? I'm talking about that scene in the isolation cabin when Hallie, all her pictures blow off in the wind and Annie comes and helps her. She goes, who's that? And she's like, you never heard of Leonardo DiCaprio? How far away is England anyway? And he's like, it's a long way from here. What? First off, being from England is not an excuse to not know who Leonardo DiCaprio is. History lesson. Late 1997, this little movie comes out called Titanic. And the following year after Titanic was Leo Mania. It's not like Annie's living in some stone fortress in the middle of the boonies of England, if that exists. Living in central London with her famous fashion designer mother. I don't buy that, like, at all. It's not like people in England didn't know what Titanic was. I'm pretty darn sure Titanic did not tank overseas. Technically it did. Too soon. Now we've reached what I think to be the most absurd, unbelievable, illogical, ridiculous thing about this entire scenario of this movie. Two sane parents, upon their divorce, deciding that the most rational idea for their situation is to each take a child and raise them as their own. Not just never see the other child again, but basically pretend it never existed. Who agrees to that? Clearly Nick and Elizabeth are not crazy, irrational people. Were they okay with that? They're like, that's a great idea. That's top notch. You would have to really, 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 really hate the other person to decide that that's the best answer to this problem. Hate is obviously not the issue. I asked her in the movie, so what happened to us? And she was like, oh, Nick, we were young and we were angry. What? You split up your twin children? They come from the same egg. That's the real kicker. And you are okay with them living apart for the rest of their lives. The funny thing is now that Dennis Quaid has twins, down the road, they're gonna watch this movie and go to their dad and be like, would someone ever do that? Why would someone do that? And Dennis is gonna be all like, oh, I don't know. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Yeah, it pretty much is. But it's cool because I'll probably still be watching this movie for the rest of my freaking life. Oh God, this is like 9 minutes long. Thanks for watching. If this is successful, maybe I'll do more of them and try not to look like I die about 5 times throughout the entire video. Follow the Duds on Twitter and Blogger, and we'll see you tomorrow and next week and every other post.